quiz time. Question 3 for Barney Frank. There are 10 media markets in the state of Florida, which means it's a very expensive place to campaign. On average, what is the cost of a weekly media buy in Florida? I'll give this is a ballpark question.
I have no idea.
Is it $1 million? Is it $2 million? Or is it $6 million? Let's take a stab. 1, 2, or 6. A weekly media buy in Florida.
With 10 media markets?
With 10 media markets.
Yeah, I'm torn between 2 and 6.
You stick with 2. That's the one. Question 4. Marco Rubio is a favorite son in Florida on Tuesday. What other candidate also is a favorite son? Yeah, in Ohio. And let's say, question 5. Let's go to the political Wayback Machine right now. Who was the Florida Republican Secretary of State during the 2000 Bush-Gore recount?
You know.
Went on to serve in Congress for several terms.
Yeah, I served with her. Catherine.
Yep.
No, I get old and I forget.
Harris is her last name.
Catherine Harris. She was from the west coast of Florida.
Yeah, very good. Very good, Barney.
You're still a resident of Massachusetts, even though you're not a congressman here anymore. So we're just going to ask you one quick question about the local politics. Governor Charlie Baker, he's a Republican, of course. He has phenomenal approval ratings right now. So who on your side of the political aisle do you think should or could run against him and win?
Well, as to should, I don't know what it's going to be like 2 years from now. And that's a very
but anybody who's thinking about doing it is thinking about it now.
Yes, but they're not going to make the decision until they are a lot closer. Look, Governor Baker is going to have a problem if Donald Trump is the Republican nominee, as it looks like he could be. Baker has done a pretty good job of tightrope walking between the rightward move of his party and a more common sense pro-Massachusetts approach. A nominee, Donald Trump as a nominee, is going to risk that. Baker could wind up, for instance, if he does not embrace Trump, with a third-party Republican against him in 2018. He had that potential, and he defused it last time.
But what Democrats would you like to see run against him?
Well, at this point,
or at least think about it.
I think Maura Healey is a very, the Attorney General, and I think she's doing a very good job as Attorney General. She would be, I think, the likeliest one. I'll give you a candidate that probably doesn't want to be a candidate, and that's, we were talking about him before, Marty Meehan. Marty Meehan has done a superb job as he was a very good member of Congress. He did an excellent job at UMass Lowell. It was a good thing that he became the president of University of Massachusetts against those who said, "Oh, never put a politician in there." I wanted Marty to run for governor last time.
I don't want to end on such a heavy note, but I do want to ask you because of your expertise. There's a lot of talk about how to best confront and eliminate ISIS, but so far no one has come up with a national strategy. What's wrong? What are we doing wrong?
Nothing. Why is this view that it's somehow America's power to get rid of everything bad in the world? What you have in the Middle East is a serious pathology in which a number of people have taken the religion of Islam and turned it into a weapon. Now, that doesn't mean every Muslim or even most Muslims feel that way. There are places like Indonesia where Islam is perfectly rational, and the Muslims in India are more the victims than the aggressors of any kind of mistreatment. But in the combination of the Middle East and Islam has produced this terrible problem. And you have people who are brutal murderers. And
but it is our problem too, though.
What?
It is our problem.
No, I wasn't. I'd like to talk about the issue. The question was, what are we doing wrong? Yeah. I don't believe that it is. That assumes that there's some magic, or not magic, some strategy by which America could get rid of this. I do think sending an army in is a mistake. Look, it happened in Iraq. I do not, because we made a terrible mistake by taking over. I think the best thing to do is to combat them. But let's also be clear. If there is not a willingness on the part of a large number of Muslims in the Middle East themselves to confront ISIS, there's nothing any outside force can do. And what I object to is this notion that let's assume that America can solve every problem, and if a problem goes unsolved, it's somehow the fault of the United States. No, we don't control reality.
Congressman, thank you so much. It's great to see you. Barney Frank, always a welcome chair here at OTR. Great to have you with us. We continue on the record. Stay with us.